folks, how's it going? My name is Sandra Harney. I'm a recent graduate of the dual degree Global Business and French between DCU and Neoma Business School here in France. And this is just a video to give a heads up to anyone who's either considering on joining the Global Business course or is already in second year and will soon be coming to France, just to give you a heads up on what the experience here in France is like and to give you a few tips and pointers along the way. Now, there are quite a few sections to this video. It turned out quite long, so if there's any particular part that interests you the most, feel free to click on the annotations here. That'll take you to that part of the video. Generally speaking though, I will be giving you a general idea of the timeline for the 2 years. I'll be talking about the school, the city of Reims, the classes you'll be taking, the internship you'll be doing at the end of third year, as well as a thesis in your final year, and just generally what the whole experience is like. So for the general timeline, you start off third year with 4 months of classes, followed by 6 months of paid internship in a French-speaking country, depending on when you start your internship. So you can start as early as January, but you might start later if you didn't find a placement so quick, like myself. You'll either have between 0 or 2 months of summer holidays before you come back to fourth year in Reims, and you do 9 months of classes and exams and thesis writing. The first 4 months are quite grueling and they're definitely the hardest part of the 2 years. However, if you survive that, the internship definitely makes it all worthwhile. And actually the final year, so your last 9 months, are actually a lot more comfortable, partially because of the experience that you've gained, but mainly because you actually have a much lighter class schedule. So the whole thing starts off in September of third year with a intense week-long French language course. You'll be together with all the other foreign students, so the Italians, the Germans, the Spanish, the Mexicans, the Americans. The French won't be there that week. Your class schedule is going to be quite light, so it'll also give you a chance to take care of any accommodation, banking, or admin stuff that you might still need to do. So the French course is going to give you a refresher on all of the basics of French grammar. At the end of the week, you're going to take an exam, which is going to put you between 1 and 10. 1 being I'm practically a native speaker, 10 being I really need a lot of work. Now, this grade doesn't actually affect your grade average. The class isn't worth any credits. However, it does determine what French class you get put in for the rest of the semester. My personal advice here is don't study a huge amount for this exam. Of course, refresh your memory. Pay attention during the classes that you have that week. It'll have been a while since you sat in a French class, so yeah, do refresh your memory, but don't cram the night before, only to forget it the next day. You want the result of this exam to actually reflect your real base level of French. Depending on what group you're in, you get more or less French classes. So if your French isn't great, just bite the bullet, take the extra classes, you'll benefit a lot from it. And on top of that, teachers are actually aware of which class you're in. So when they're grading your paper, they might go a little easier on you if they can see that your French level isn't great. For the rest of the semester, along with your French classes, you'll be taking a bunch of general classes in accounting, economics, finance, European studies, and so on. I'll include a list here. You can pause the screen if you want to see them. These are the classes that we took in third year. This might of course be different for you, but generally speaking in third year you don't have a choice, so the classes you take, they're all very general. There's no specialization with these classes just yet. You'll have a lot of class hours this semester, so expect a 9 to 5 kind of class schedule with group work, assignments, and study afterwards. Classes are 3 hours long with a 15-minute break at the halfway point. Generally speaking, lecturers will lecture for the first half and then do some kind of exercise or tutorial for the second half. However, depending on the lecturer and depending on the subject, they may also just lecture for the whole 3 hours. So just prepare yourself for the slight shock or the slight adjustment of getting used to having significantly longer classes here than you do back in DCU. However, having said that, personally I actually really like having longer classes. It means you have less subjects in one day and it really allows you to focus on one topic at a time. It'll feel a bit like you're back in secondary school. The whole year is going to be split up into groups of about 30 to 40 people. You'll take all of your classes with these people, bar French. You'll often be sitting in the same classroom, and unfortunately you're going to be taking a whopping 11 courses in your first semester. This does add a lot of pressure and it does mean a lot of exams in December, but try not to panic. It's totally doable. You just have to be really organized about it. The first thing I'd say is go to all your classes. They are actually all mandatory anyway. Lecturers will take attendance. There's often a continuous assessment grade for attendance, and if at the end of the semester you are borderline pass-fail, They will look at your attendance. That will either go in your favor or against it. The second thing I'd say is understand what's happening in class today. Don't leave it till later, you won't have time. 4 months is going to go by real quick. So make sure that you ask the lecturer questions if you don't get something. If it's a question of French, you can still ask the lecturer. They're there to help you. They're happy to answer your questions. And you can also ask your francophone friends who might be sitting next to you or after class. In summary, you're going to spend your first semester working really hard and studying, but worry not, those 4 months will fly by and you'll be into the internship in no time. Now for a bit on the school. So like a lot of private schools, Neoma and specifically CESEM, which is the department that you'll be in, it's not a huge campus school. There aren't like a huge amount of places just to sit and hang out. The facilities are good, they definitely do the job, but they really don't compare to the magnificent wonder of the DCU campus. So there are 2 campuses. There's Campus 2, which is closer to town. It's about a 20-minute walk from the city centre, 3 or 4 tram stops. This is where you'll be having 90% of your classes. There's also the nicer, flashier Campus 1, which is a further 10 to 15 minute walk or 2 tram stops from Campus 2, but that's mainly meant for the other degrees like Supdeco or Thema. Campus 1 is actually on the border of a relatively dodgy part of town called Croix Rouge. Now my experience is quite safe to walk around during the day. The Université de Reims is also just there, so there's generally people walking around, and the school building itself is quite secure. You do need a student card to get in and there are security guards. But what I would say to you above all is don't go there at night if you can avoid it, and also just don't live in this area. It's not a good place to live. It's not worth being close to school because it's just a bit of a dodgy area. Campus 1 is also where you're going to find the school library. It's only about the size of 1 floor of the DCU library, so its size does mean that it's quite packed during exam time, but it can be a great place to go and work and be productive. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of the library. I can't really work there comfortably, so what I do is I go to Campus 2, I find an empty classroom and I work there. It's totally allowed, but you just have to be ready to move if a class that has actually booked the room comes along. Both campuses have canteens where it's about €4 for a hot meal, about €3 for a sandwich, baguette sort of situation, and there's also coffee and vending machines, as well as microwaves for heating up your own food. Looking at the surrounding area of Campus 2, there's a DS supermarket just across the street. There's an Intermarché supermarket about a 3 or 4 minute walk, which is bigger food selection and a lot more packaged sandwiches and such. There's a McDonald's to the right, and while I've never eaten there before myself, there's a canteen called the Cruise, which is just across the street in the high school accommodation building, and I hear the prices are slightly cheaper and the portions a bit bigger than what we get in our canteen. Now, while it's not meant for us per se, it's a student canteen and they don't seem to notice or at least care if other students eat there. On an organisational level, in CESEM we have 2 class reps per year. These class reps communicate between the student body and the administration on bigger issues. We also have a sort of student council called the BDE, who organise parties and get-togethers like running dinners or nights out, as well as the Ibwe sporting weekend away. You'll find out more about that when you get here. You can also run for a class rep position, or you can run to be on the student council. It's quite time consuming even just to run for a position, but if you're into that sort of thing, it's definitely worthwhile. The clubs and Socs life isn't quite as developed here as it is in DCU, or rather it exists, but it's somewhat poorly advertised to CESEM because most of the stuff takes part on Campus 1 with all the other departments. So there will be a clubs and Socs day early on in the year, so that you can get to know them all. They'll be on Campus 1. Highly recommend that you go ahead and join a few. I know you'll only be here for 4 months in your first year, but you'll be back for a full 9 months the next year, so it'll be definitely worthwhile. For the sports club especially, you do have to pay a fee, and it is a bit cheaper for you if you pay it for the full 2 years. I've included a link below to a booklet that had the clubs and Socs that existed the year that we were there, just to give you an idea of what's on offer. As a bit of a side note, you won't need to buy any books while you're here. Lecturers are going to provide you with everything that you need in either printed form or through Moodle. You will of course need a laptop, preferably with a VGA connector, so you can connect all the projectors for all those presentations that you're going to be doing. Don't worry if you have a Mac, for instance, an Apple computer. They do have connectors down at the reception. If you need one, just bring your student card down and they'll give you one in exchange for the card. And then when you bring the piece back, they'll give you the card back. A quick few words on the city of Reims itself. It's located in the region of Champagne-Ardenne, which is where all the real champagne is made. It's about an hour or so by train from Paris. Personally, I really like this city. I think it's a great mix between activity in the city centre and calm in the residential areas. In the city centre, there's plenty of shops, bars, restaurants, cinemas. There's amenities like the many parks, the canal, basketball courts, and if you're into soccer, there's also the Stade de Reims, where you can go watch a match. I'm, however, part of a minority here. Most people do complain about the lack of nightlife and can't wait to live somewhere more lively. I do have to admit that the place can be a little dead some evenings, and the fact that the shops aren't open on a Sunday is kind of a nuisance. However, there are 2 to 3 other universities in Reims, so there are plenty of students out in the cafes and bars on Place d'Erlon, which is the main plaza or square in the town centre. There are 2 or 3 other nightclubs, Vogue and Atrium being the most popular. You'll have plenty of nights out to these. But of course, it's not really going to compare to the capital city like Dublin, which also happens to be great for nights out. So just a bit of an adjustment. You can pretty much walk everywhere, and if not, you can cycle. Public transport's also great. There's plenty of buses. There's also a tram that goes from the town centre train station through the town centre out to the university and out to another TGV station called Champagne-Ardenne, which is about 8 kilometres outside of the city, from where you can get a direct train all the way to Charles de Gaulle Airport. So if you do get a bit bored, you can take a weekend trip to Paris quite easily. Unfortunately, the train tickets can be quite costly though. They can be around 30 to 60 euro one way if you don't book them in advance. Definitely recommend getting a carte jeune or a youth card, which is a discount card for anyone under the age of 26. It'll cost you about 50 euro and it'll last you a whole year, and you'll actually pretty much make your money back in about 4 round trips. An alternative option for getting to Paris or anywhere else for that matter is covoiturage or carpooling. Check the description box below for a link to a website that does covoiturage, but basically all it means is that someone who's driving somewhere has a few empty seats in their car and they can make a bit of extra money by offering you the seat for payment. It's all very safe and secure. All the payments are done online, and in fact the driver doesn't receive the money until you've sent them a code by text after you've got the lift. Now this way it will take you 2 hours to get to Paris, which is about twice the time with the train, but it only costs you 10 euro. And I can tell you from personal experience, it can actually be kind of nice to chat to the people in the car. It's a really good way of meeting some really cool people. Leading on from the city, we have the question of accommodation. It can be a bit of a hassle to sort out, and it's probably going to be one of your biggest worries for the 2 years that you're here. But here are a few pointers and a few tips on how to get it all done. For the first semester, you can either choose an apartment without seeing it, which obviously isn't ideal, but you'll only be staying there for 4 months anyway, so maybe it's not the end of the world if it's not a great place. Having said that, a much better option is to come a few weeks early, stay in a hostel or an Airbnb, go see a few places and choose one that way. The best option, however, is to get an apartment for one of the 4th years that are actually leaving. You can do this by checking the Facebook pages below, but generally speaking, this means that if a 4th year has bothered to live there all year, it's probably a pretty good place, so you can be guaranteed that it's going to be a good place without having to go see it. You can find accommodation through an agence immobilier or estate agents. They'll sort you out, but they'll also charge you a heavy fee, which will be equivalent to about a month's rent. So it's definitely a lot cheaper to find your accommodation online through Facebook groups like RMS Colocation or Niggas in Reims, or just generally on websites that are meant for colocation or location. I've linked a few of them below. But I mean, generally speaking, if you Google the name of the city, colocation or location, you'll find websites where people are advertising a lot of stuff. I'd also highly recommend a website called Le Bon Coin. It's a bit like the Done Deal back home, where people can put up classified ads selling secondhand goods, but also has a really big accommodation section. That's personally where I found my accommodation in Paris during my internship. So yeah, it saved me a lot of money. I highly recommend it. So going back to your first semester, you'll be looking for accommodation for 4 months, and as you might expect, 4-month leases don't really exist. What most people end up doing is they sign a 9-month lease and they break it after 4 months. This is totally legal. You just have to give your landlord or your agence immobilier 3 months notice. So in my case, a month after I arrived in October, I told my landlady, sorry, but I didn't find the internship in Reims that I had hoped to find. I have to move elsewhere. She was really cool about it, and as a courtesy I advertised a room on Facebook, and I found someone else to take the room for 2nd semester. This works out really well actually, because there's some French students in CESEM who do their internship in the 1st semester and they come back for the 2nd semester, so they're also looking for accommodation, so you should have no trouble finding someone to replace you. Price-wise in Reims, you can expect anything between 300 to 500 euro. There are plenty of nice studios in Reims, but they can be a bit more expensive, so it can be nicer and less expensive to live with other people. Most places in France aren't furnished, so very occasionally you do have landlords who are targeting students and they will actually furnish the place, but a lot of people do actually end up having to buy their own furniture, either from IKEA or on Le Bon Coin, or if they're lucky, the people that lived there before them will sell them their furniture. Now what a lot of people actually have done to bypass these problems is that they've taken a 2-year lease. So when they arrive in 3rd year, they actually say, hey, I'm going to sign this contract for 2 years, and then they sublet the apartment when they're gone for their internship. This way they can keep the same apartment for the whole 2 years, and they can also keep the furniture there for the whole time. Personally, I was lucky and I found an apartment that was furnished, so it's more than doable. Just keep an eye out for them. I should also mention that there are some student accommodation type places around Reims. I'll link them down below, but generally speaking they're really expensive for the square meterage that you get. But they can be a really good solution for the first 4 months. There's also a local accommodation subsidy called the APL or the CAF, which is the Caisse Allocation Familiale, which is part of the local municipality or local government. And basically here you go through a really long application process, you know, giving your lease, your birth certs, income certs, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of it, you could get 90 euros a month to help pay for your rent. Personally, that's what I got for paying 370 euros a month for rent. Obviously, they'll give you more or less depending on how much rent you pay a month. Now, there are a few little tricky bits with regards to accommodation in the first 4 months. Usually, if you want to sign a lease for an apartment or for a bedroom, you do need to have a French bank account set up first. But in order to have a French bank account, you need to have proof of French address. So a way around that is to basically get someone else who already lives in Reims, who already has a place, or the hostel or hotel that you're staying at, to write you a little letter that says that you're living there temporarily. I've included a link down below for a template for this kind of letter. That way you can just print it out and get it signed. But basically this letter will suffice as proof of address for setting up your bank account. And then once you have your bank account set up, you can get ahead and sign your lease. So once you finished your 4 months of classes, you then get to do a 6-month internship in a francophone country. This unfortunately does not include Canada, so your choices are between France, Luxembourg, and francophone parts of Belgium, like Brussels. Realistically though, you won't have a huge amount of choices to where you're going. You're going to go where you find some company who's willing to hire you. So there isn't a whole lot to say about the internship experience itself, except that you'll have a blast, and you'll definitely have a lot of stories to tell people when you get home, especially if you end up in cities like Paris or Luxembourg, where you'll have a lot of your other classmates. You'll realise the joy of clocking off at 5 PM and actually having the weekends to relax and explore cities instead of worrying about studying. However, I'm afraid that finding accommodation is going to be even harder than it was in Reims, especially if you end up in a city like Paris where the housing market just moves so fast that if you see an apartment today, you really have to take it today because it won't be there tomorrow. Also, there are genuinely some places in Paris which are not good enough to live in, so it's absolutely imperative that you go and see the place before you rent it. The techniques for finding accommodation are the same as in Reims. Use Facebook groups like Paris Colocation or websites like Le Bon Coin. Some people did find accommodation together, hence reducing the price. Personally, I found a room with a family on Le Bon Coin, and that worked out really well for me. As I said before, it's really important that you go see the place and walk around the area before you actually sign a lease for a place. If you're not really comfortable going to that area on your own, be sure to bring a friend with you. Some of the funniest stories do come out of Paris accommodation hunting. These are all stories that we retell and laugh about to get us through 4th year. Google Maps Street View is your friend for apartment hunting. You can literally do a virtual tour of the street or surrounding area of the apartment, meaning that you don't have to waste time going to see places that are clearly not on a good street. As you already know, Paris is split up into arrondissements, or like sectors. Some of them are better, safer, cheaper. It really depends on your own preferences. It's really case by case. What's your budget like? Do you want to be close to work? Where is your work? Do you want to be close to town? Maybe if you're going on nights out, close to transport, so on and so forth. But there isn't really like a clear-cut rule of one arrondissement being better than the other. Within each arrondissement, there are good streets and there are bad streets. To give you an example, I wanted to be close to work, which is in the northern part of Paris, so I ended up living in one of the dodgiest parts of town, called Barbès, which is always in the news for riots and police action and fighting and all that kind of stuff. But literally 2 streets over from Barbès, there is Sacré-Cœur, which is like the most hipster bobo part of town, with really high rent prices and where everyone wants to be. So it just kind of shows that you really have to go and see the place. You really can't know by saying, oh, it's in the 19th arrondissement, it's no good. It's literally street by street, so you really have to go and see the place or have a look on Google Street View to get an idea for the place. Again, you can get the CAF if you've actually gone and signed the lease for your apartment. Quick editor's note, I totally forgot to mention the fact that you'll also be eligible for the LLP grant when you're doing your internship here in France. It's an Erasmus initiative. DCU will send you an email about it when the time is right, so just keep an eye out for that and don't miss the deadlines. Speaking of Erasmus, you'll also be eligible for the Erasmus Plus grant while you're here, which is totally separate. You can take it in your 3rd or your 4th year. However, it's highly recommended to take it in your 4th year because you'll be in school all year and therefore you'll be eligible for a bigger grant. With regards to actually finding the internship, all I say is start early. Start in September when you come in 3rd year. Those first 4 months are going to absolutely fly by. It'll be a busy rush, it'll be over in a flash, and it'll be December before you know it, and you'll be panicking over finding an internship for January. Having said that, counting the summer months, you do actually have 8 months to do the 6-month internship, so you can start a little bit later, which is what I did. but of course that eats into your summer holidays, so it's of course preferable to start early. I've included links to a few employment websites down below. Interns are a real market here in France. There's a minimum wage of about €430 per month for any internship that lasts more than 3 months. However, some internships do actually pay more, especially in the banking and insurance sectors. It's also really good to go to the career service in CESEM because they actually have a list of all the internships that any student in CESEM has ever done. So they'll be happy to give you the contact details of these companies that regularly take students, and you might even be able to contact this company before they put the ad online. Another service I highly recommend is AJStage. It's an employment website like the others, except they actually assign each candidate an agent. So an agent is going to call you up, they're going to go through your CV, go through your skills, they'll look through the listing of companies and open internships, match the skills to the listing, and they'll hook you up with interviews. Personally, I had a great experience. My agent Antoine, he found me 2 interviews. They went really great, and the follow-up was really great from him too. So the first 4 months of classes and the internship were a total rush, and now it's time to come back to Reims, slow your roll for the last 9 months of 4th year. Either you'll be going back to accommodation you had before, or you'll be looking for new stuff. Either way, it's going to be a lot less stressful because you know your way around. You'll be back on campus too, taking your mandatory classes. In first semester, you will still be taking quite a wide range of mandatory subjects. However, they will be somewhat more specialised than in 3rd year. You also won't be taking any more French classes from this point on, but don't worry, you won't be needing them anymore. Your French level will be more than sufficient by this point. You will finally get to specialise in your 2nd semester of 4th year. You will be picking 2 majors and 4 minors. This means you can finally drop those subjects that you're not interested in and really get stuck into some interesting work. These courses are completed one after the other, so whereas in 3rd year you had all your subjects mixed up in the week, here you're going to do one course, finish it, and then you're going to start the next course. All the grades for these majors and minors are actually continuous assessment, so you're going to have presentations, assignments, group works, but you won't have exams at the end of the semester. While the class hours for each of the different types of majors you can choose from are the same, the workload definitely isn't. So I would highly recommend that you go to the presentations that the school are going to organise for each of the modules to get a feel for what the lecture and the workload for each module is like. You're going to have even less class hours in your 2nd semester than in your 1st. I know this is not a chance to take a bunch of time off and go have lots of fun. It's because you're going to be very busy writing your thesis. Having said that, your thesis writing does actually start in September of 4th year, so you'll already have been writing your thesis in the 1st semester. The school's going to take you through a step-by-step process. There's a booklet with instructions and everything, so don't worry about that just yet. I won't go into too much detail here, but I'll say that a thesis for us, it basically means finding a question or a problématique, and then going out and doing research and answering the question. Simple as that. There are 2 different types of thesis that you can do. There's an M2, which is a pure research paper. So when you're answering the question, all your sources are going to be books, online libraries, databases, and such. You can also do an M1, where half of it is like a research paper, but the other half is that you're going to be talking to companies and people who work in companies and getting their input on the question that you're treating. The thesis needs to be about 70 to 100 pages long and in French. And I know that sounds like a lot, but trust me, you will have no problem filling those pages. You'll actually be going over. I thought it was a huge amount of pages in the beginning. Once you get actually to doing the research and starting to write, you'll fill those 70 pages in no time. For the most part, your French level really won't be a problem by this point. You'll have been living and working in France for a year and a half. However, you might still need to get someone to correct your grammar mistakes. A lot of students do deal with other French students in other years where they exchange English classes for the correction of the thesis. Others do pay a professional to do the corrections for them. That can cost a lot of money, but there are teachers in the school who are also willing to do that, and that'll usually set you back about 80 to 100 euro. Each student has a thesis tutor to help them through the 9 months of work. You will be given a chance to approach teachers to ask them to be your tutor. Not every teacher can be a tutor, they get a special training for this. But it can be a really good idea to approach someone because that way you're sure that you're going to get someone who's knowledgeable in your field of choice and also interested in the topic in general. If you don't ask a specific tutor yourself, you will get one assigned to you, and this can go really well or horribly wrong, as it has for some people. You can get someone who is of absolutely no help to you at all, but on the flip side, you can also get someone who's so passionate about your topic that they try and influence your work, which isn't great either. This tutor is also the person who will be grading your thesis, along with a co-evaluator of their choice. 14 out of the 20 points are going to go for the written thesis itself, and the remaining 6 you're going to get for presentation and defense, called the soutenance, which you'll do after you hand in your written paper. You'll find out more about this later, but the soutenance is basically where you do about a 10-minute, 15-minute presentation, and then the tutors and the co-evaluator have about a 20-30 minute period to ask you any questions that they have in mind. So that's the entire CESEM experience, from your first 4 months of classes to your internship to your final year with your thesis. I'm sure there's plenty of things I've neglected to mention. If so, don't hesitate to post your questions down below, or better yet, go to our Facebook page. That way any EBFer can respond to your question. Also, just send me an email if you need to. I'll put my email address down below. I live about an hour and a half from Reims myself, so if you ever get stuck in Reims or something, don't hesitate to contact me. I'll help you if I can. So yeah, I think that's everything I think of. All I'd say is, yeah, it's tough, it's hard, it's a challenge, but it's definitely worthwhile, I can say, as someone who has graduated. And it's definitely not as intimidating as it seems. You can definitely survive it. The 20 of us that have graduated this year is definitely proof. And yeah, so don't hesitate to contact us. Best of luck when you come over here, and yeah, hope to see you over here. Ciao.